Cinema, the magic vehicle, a comprehensive guide. Journey 1, 1913 to 1950.
So if you think back to the early 1920s, you'd probably assume that France, it's the birthplace of cinema, right?
Right, the Lumiere brothers, all of that.
Exactly. You'd think they were just dominating the global film stage. But that just wasn't the case at all.
No, it was the opposite, really. After the trauma of World War I, French cinema was, well, the phrase at the time was, of very little consequence.
Which is a shocking thing to hear.
It is. It was a chaotic time creatively. It's been 10 years since the wild fantasies of Georges Méliès and those big historical dramas of the film d'art style.
And in that time, France had fallen behind.
Way behind. They were looking over at Germany, at Sweden, and seeing these really strong, distinctive national cinematic styles developing.
So pressure was on. And it wasn't just about entertainment, was it?
Not at all. This was a really intellectual quest. They were trying to define the very soul of French cinema, to build a unique aesthetic for a modern France.
It was a mission.
A mission, yeah. To find their artistic identity again through film.
And today, we're looking at the birth of a movement called French Impressionist cinema.
And specifically, a key early film by Marcel L'Herbier from 1920, Man of the Sea, or L'Homme du Large.
A film that tried so hard to capture the inner world of the mind, but its real power, its lasting power, came from the fury of the real external world.
That's the tension right there. It's this foundational film because it shows what happens when this grand intellectual ambition smashes up against the raw reality the camera can capture. It's a theory versus the ocean spray.
So let's unpack that, this Impressionist movement. It sounds incredibly ambitious. Who was leading the charge, and what exactly were they trying to do on screen?
Well, the main guy, the principal theorist, was a man named Louis Delluc. And his goal was, it was huge.
Okay.
He wanted cinema to be the equivalent of Impressionist painting, where it's all about light, subjective feeling. Or, maybe even more ambitiously, the novels of Marcel Proust.
Proust. So we're talking In Search of Lost Time.
Exactly. We're talking about novels that are almost entirely about memory and consciousness and the internal world.
So Delluc's big idea was to visually represent mental processes, to film a thought.
That's it, exactly. To film a thought or a feeling or a memory. And in silent film, that meant you had to throw out conventional storytelling.
Right, because you can't rely on dialogue.
No. So you turn to technique. Superimposition, subjective camera work where things get blurry, extreme close-ups on a face to share emotion, really fast, rhythmic editing, things that could only exist inside a character's head.
That is an incredible technical challenge. But in practice, as cool as filming a thought sounds, it must have created some problems for the audience, right?
It created two massive problems that really the movement never quite solved. The first was what critics started calling ponderous formalism.
Ponderous formalism?
Yeah. The filmmakers got so obsessed with the form, with the technique of showing an emotion, that they kind of fled from everyday life. The films could feel really cold or just detached.
So the technique was getting in the way of the story.
It was. And that led to the second issue, which was just a lack of communication. If your visual language is too personal, too subjective, or the story is too intellectual,
the audience gets left behind.
Completely. They were so focused on aesthetic refinement that they forgot to tell a story people could actually connect with.
And you can see this in Delluc's own films, can't you? Things like Fier or El Femme de Nulle Part.
Prime examples. They follow all the rules of the movement, but they feel a bit stagnant. And even when the films had real passion, the techniques could be, jarring.
Like in Germaine Dulac's Elle Souriante Madame Boudet.
Exactly. A fervently anti-bourgeois film about an unhappy housewife. But to show how stifled she feels, Delluc used deformed images and associative editing.
Okay, let's break that down for you listening. Deformed images. Are we talking about shooting through warped glass or using mirrors?
Yeah, precisely that. Using anamorphic lenses, maybe, or shooting a reflection in water. Any visual distortion that physically shows the character's mental state, their confusion, their pain.
And associative editing.
That's cutting between things that aren't physically connected. So you see a close-up of a face, then a shot of a flickering lamp, then back to the face. It's meant to suggest a psychological link, a thought process, not a real-world action.
It's definitely pioneering stuff, but I can see how it would be demanding for a viewer.
For sure. And that intellectual push is what brings us to Marcel L'Herbier and Man of the Sea.
Right. L'Herbier's work was also seen as aesthetically exaggerated, just like everyone else's. But this film is different. It's early in his career. He's only about 30, and it's seen as his best work.
And I think the key to why it's different is the source material. It's not based on some abstract poem. It's a free adaptation of a short story by Honoré de Balzac.
Balzac. Okay, that name alone just grounds the whole project in reality, doesn't it?
It really does. I mean, Balzac is the father of French literary realism.
The human comedy.
Exactly. So you've got this central conflict right there. L'Herbier, the Impressionist theorist, trying to apply his high-minded ideas to a foundation of raw, gritty, 19th century realism.
And the film's real strength comes from that realism Balzac provides, almost in spite of L'Herbier's theories.
It really does. And the team he put together was, well, it was a who's who of young French talent. George Lucas on photography, giving us those incredible outdoor shots.
And the actor Jacques Catalan, who plays the son, Michel. He was so involved, he was also credited as an editor with L'Herbier.
Yeah, and you also see a tiny role for a future star, Charles Boyer. And Claude Autant-Lara, who became a huge director later, he did the art direction and costumes. Very young, very ambitious team.
So let's get into the story, because the drama here is, well, it's not subtle.
Not at all. It centers on this character, Nolf, a sailor from Brittany, a proud man who is just completely defined by the ocean. He loves the sea. And as the source says, he actively scorns landlubbers.
And all that pride comes down to one single massive expectation. His son, Michel, has to follow him to sea.
And this is the core conflict. Michel wants nothing to do with it. He completely rejects the sea.
He's drawn to the land, to the taverns.
To the chaos of it, the drinking, the parties. And at first, Nolf kind of indulges him, but Michel's rejection of his father's world is absolute. It leads to this profound moral collapse.
And that downward spiral happens. It's just shockingly fast. He becomes completely cut off from his family. Our source even notes he's not moved even by his mother's serious illness.
Wow, that tells you everything. It's a total repudiation of his father's values.
Yeah.
And his crimes get worse than just being a drunk. He gets into a fight, ends up in prison.
And when he gets out, he steals the money that was set aside for his sister's dowry.
Which is a huge betrayal in that society. But the final straw, the unforgivable act, is perjury, lying under oath. For Nolf, a man whose whole world is built on pride and honor, that just shatters everything.
It's completely broken by it.
Completely. And he makes this decision that is just biblical in its severity. He takes Michel, puts him in a small boat, pushes him out to sea, and says he is putting him into God's hands.
It's essentially an execution. A father executing his son by sea.
Yeah.
The shock of that for a 1920s audience must have been incredible.
It gives the film an emotional gut punch that most of those other intellectual formalist films just didn't have, and the fallout is just pure tragedy. His sister enters a convent out of despair.
And Nolf himself just wanders the shore for months, a ghost tormented by the very sea he used to love.
Yeah. Now, this is where we have to be a little critical of the film's narrative.
Okay.
Our source points out that the unbearably melodramatic finale detracts from the film's appeal.
Right. It all gets tied up a little too neatly, doesn't it?
Way too neatly. Michel is, of course, saved by fishermen. He has a sudden change of heart, comes back a hero, and the sister leaves the convent to marry a sailor. It softens the brutal edges of what came before.
But if we can sort of set that tidy ending aside, this is where our deep dive really shifts.
Yeah.
Because the film's lasting power isn't in the plot. It's not even in the attempt to film Nolf's tormented mind.
No, it's in the setting. It's in the execution of that world. L'Herbier's camera gives you this authentic and convincing description of life on the Brittany coast. You feel the reality of it.
The white cliffs, the costumes, the wrathful sea, as the source calls it.
Yes, the environment becomes the most powerful character in the whole film.
And this is where L'Herbier's technical skill actually ends up serving realism, maybe by accident. The editing is called very intelligent because it blends those harsh natural elements right into the story.
The sea isn't just a background. It's Nolf's conscience. It's his judge and his executioner. And that focus on the landscape was heavily influenced by the Swedish cinema of the time, which was famous for it.
So that natural world often plays a role that's more prominently and with greater effect than the human drama.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's get into the big technical innovation here because it's a mouthful.
It is.
The idea of the change of the size of the image to suit the character of the scene. What does that actually look like for a viewer?
It means L'Herbier was changing the frame size on the fly. We'd probably think of it as a subtle zoom today, but back then it was more likely using masks on the lens to block off parts of the frame.
So if it's a really intense internal moment for Nolf, the image might suddenly close in on him.
Exactly. It's a way of visually forcing your attention onto the subjective psychological reality of a character. It's a very early version of a rapid emotional close-up. It shows that Impressionist theory really pushing the technology of the camera.
But crucially, it was innovation that was layered on top of real life.
Yes, they weren't just showing you distorted dream sequences, they were showing you real people in authentic local costumes at a real Easter fair, all set against this incredibly dramatic, real landscape.
Although we should probably note that while the camera work was innovative, the acting was still a work in progress.
That's a good way to put it. The performances were generally seen as rather theatrical and overacted.
Yeah.
Roger Carl as Nolf was considered relatively good, but it was a common problem in French film at the time, that transition from stage to screen.
Which just reinforces the whole point, doesn't it? The raw power of the external real world captured by the camera was just more powerful than the staged internal drama from the actors.
It really was.
Which brings this all back to our source for this deep dive, Cinema, the Magic Vehicle, a comprehensive guide.
That book, all about showing why films matter. Not just the plot, but the history, the innovations, the social questions.
And Man of the Sea is a perfect example of that tension the book talks about. You have this intellectual movement, Impressionism, with these very strict formalist goals.
The quest to film a thought.
Right. And yet, its best and most lasting art came when it just gave in to the raw documentary power of realism, when it just paid attention to life and the landscape.
The film tells us that L'Herbier was aiming for Proust, but he achieved greatness through Balzac. It reflects its time not in its clever camera tricks, but in its brutal, convincing picture of a country grappling with tradition, family, and the overwhelming force of nature.
So what does this all mean for you, the learner? Man of the Sea is this perfect snapshot of a transitional moment. A country trying to rediscover its artistic identity by mixing this high-minded theory with gritty, boots-on-the-ground reality.
The story itself might fall a bit short, but its visual language, its technical mastery, it really did help pave the way for what came next.
We've seen how early cinema really struggled to balance that intellectual formalism, showing the internal mind, with the raw power of realism, showing the external world.
And in the end, Man of the Sea finds its true power in the external, unforgiving world of the sea and the land. So it leaves you with the question, doesn't it? Does this suggest that cinema's greatest, most unique strength has always been its ability to show us the world as it is, rather than just trying to show us the world inside a character's mind? Maybe that's a job best left to the novelists. It's something to think about.